All right, everybody, welcome back to Unemployable, the podcast live streaming from beautiful Gold Coast. How are the boys today? What's going on, Mark? What's happening?
Doing good.
Doing good? Ready for round two?
Yeah, I've got some good things to talk about today.
100%.
One of my favorite dudes.
Yeah, absolutely. James, what about you? How you doing, buddy?
Mate, pumped. Yeah, ready for it. Up early, did the walk, did the fitness, got it all in, clear of mind, ready to rock and roll.
Love it. Eric, what about you? You ready to rock and roll?
Feeling good, feeling fresh.
Nah.
Well, you should do that top button up though, James, please.
Really?
Thanks, mate.
He's advertising, mate. We got a good schedule. Over the last couple of weeks, we thought we'd kick off with a bit of a book review today for our audience. A lot of people have probably seen this book out there in the market. It's written by none other than Walter Isaacson. So for those of you who don't know, Walter Isaacson basically is the guy that if you become uber famous, he's the guy that's probably going to write your biography. He did Steve Jobs' biography and a bunch of others. This is the book right here on the desk, as you can see it. It's like 2 inches thick. What do you guys make of it? What was your feedback on the book? What did you think? Did it change your perspective on Elon? Mark, what were your thoughts? You've been through it.
I think the book was amazing. I don't think it changed my perspective on Elon. I think he was quite clear on how intense he is, but it was good to really get a behind the scenes look at that. The beautiful thing about the way Walter writes his books is you actually feel like you're there in the story. So to get that front row seat, I thought it was sensational. But
because he was there with Elon for several years, right?
I think he spent a lot of time with him.
I think it was 3
text
or 4
messages back and
years.
forth, and yep.
And he interviewed a lot of Elon's circle, right? Family, friends, workers.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely gives you a huge insight into the man and the people around the man. It's quite interesting.
What was your best story, James? Like, what did you like most in the book, or was most eye-opening to you?
Yeah, that you've got the contrast between a lot of other top entrepreneurs around, but he's fairly scrappy, and in the sense of that by any means necessary in the shortest period of time, like for welding together the heat exchangers and wiping down sensors with and drying them off with a hairdryer to launch a rocket into space, like just. At no expense, and it was on time without fail. So just seeing that the scrappiness of how it all come together was pretty cool. Just like most entrepreneurial things, when you're starting something, it's never what what could be seen to be.
It shows you no matter what level you're at, like you're solving problems all day, every day. It's just he's solving much bigger problems, right?
Yeah, at speed and multiple of them.
At scale too.
Yeah. And it certainly gives you a good reflection when you're solving a problem of your own. You're like, I'm not putting a rocket on the moon. Like, get over it and get on with it. At speed.
I certainly found that myself. Like, I've got a couple of, very minor engineering challenges in one of my businesses, a product that we need to develop. And I'm like, if this dude's putting rockets into space, surely I can tackle that little thing that I've been putting off for a while. Yeah. What did you think of the book, Eric? Like, you're halfway through it?
Yeah, I'm halfway through it at the moment. To be honest, it's a very easy read for me. And I think his upbringing, to be honest, and how hard his father was on him.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Obviously, a guy with his intelligence and just being the outsider, not having many friends, just being the guy that, moved around a fair bit. And yeah, I just couldn't believe how hard his dad was on him. You think he'd support him a lot more.
Yeah.
And love that he went to Queen's University, which isn't far from where I was born.
Yeah, because he immigrated from South Africa to Canada originally.
Yeah, he did. So it was interesting that he went to Queen's. But yeah, again, being raised in such a supportive family, for me, that's very foreign to me.
Yeah.
My parents were always my 2 biggest fans, and his was a little opposite. And I think that's goes to show you the resilience that he's built in himself, and taking the risks that he's had to take. So
it's still amazing how much for this potentially the smartest guy on the planet, how much it still affects him and plagues him even to this day.
Yeah.
Like you can do all the a lot of personal development work and go back and patch up the hole, so to speak. But for a guy that can potentially design anything, redesign himself, it's been a bit of a struggle from a personal perspective.
You get the impression that that's part of what makes Elon Elon. Like, and I think the author Walter does an amazing job of really exploring that. Like, if Elon was able to put the pieces of his personal life together, would he still be Elon?
Yes.
I love the way, when everything is going great and he's on top of the world, Elon will go into one of his businesses and create a surge.
Yeah.
Right? He'll create the drama, he'll create the urgency, and that's inbuilt, that's innate. So, yeah, I do wonder if he was able to have peace, whether Elon would still be Elon. I just don't think...
I don't think you could change the recipe and have the same outcome at all.
I don't think so.
And I think for those listening who don't know what you were talking about, Mark, that idea of a surge is actually really powerful, right? Like, so when he went down to the rockets factory, they weren't scheduled to launch anything for months. And he got down there, it was Saturday night at 6 o'clock or something in the afternoon, and there was only a few guys working. And Elon just his head started to explode, going, we're trying to make the human race interplanetary here. And I've got 3 of my employees here just because it's a Saturday afternoon at 6 o'clock. Why haven't I got all of my staff here working round the clock? Because this is the most important mission. And in the pod today, we're going to explore some of the stuff Elon's doing at the moment with X/Twitter and the Dealbook Summit. And I think there's real correlation between the level of vision that the guy has, like trying to put humans on another planet, and he's deadly serious about it, and like taking over Twitter X, you can see how that's a massive play, and we'll link into that. But that idea of creating an artificial surge, I think, serves us entrepreneurs really well, especially us entrepreneurs that live in Australia, where it takes a lot of talent to die of starvation here. Like, you've got to be very disciplined and organized to kill yourself that way, right? Because we're so comfortable, and we're, even if it doesn't work out, we're okay. And I think Elon is just this incredible example of somebody who creates the necessary stress and pressure to create the diamonds. And so he called all of his staff in and said, we need to have this thing ready to launch by Friday next week. And like, it's just this insane deadline that is completely imagined, but it kind of, it breaks a lot of people, but it also attracts. And there's those stories in there of those A players that left the company and said, I can't deal with this anymore. And then came back because they realized that they were dead outside of their company. They just couldn't live without the real mission and vision that Elon brings to things. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't do that.
He definitely has a way of galvanizing his teams and bringing them on board on the mission with him. But he leads from the front as well.
Yeah, totally.
And he sleeps in his office, or he sleeps under his desk, right? And it was interesting to hear Walter kind of quiz him on that. Elon, do you really need to sleep on the floor? And he says, maybe I do, maybe I don't. But the troops like to see the general on the front lines. And so I think he really loves that battle and that fight. And how can you not rally around a guy like that that's trying to do those amazing things when he's on the front line leading with you?
A couple of the photos that were so compelling to me in the book was when he was at 2 a.m. in the morning on the production line at the factory of Tesla when they were trying to hit the 5,000 vehicles a week. And everybody said he couldn't do it. His own staff didn't believe him and were leaking stuff to the press. The short sellers moved in around the stock going, Elon's on another planet. He's never going to make 5,000. And even the board didn't think he'd do it. So they gave him billions of dollars of options if he did it. And the guy did it. And he was, overseas when the text came in with the black Tesla Model 3 coming up the line. I mean, how was that story of what they had to do to get there?
That's actually one of my favorite stories in the book. So he basically goes to his team and he says, there was an old World War II story. I can't remember which country it was, but basically they built a tent, a big outdoor tent, and created all their machinery, all their planes in this tent. And he basically didn't have enough more capacity. There was no more capacity left to do any more cars. And they're like, we're not going to hit this deadline. And he's like, think outside the box, guys. And someone came up with the idea to build a tent. And he basically knew that he was going to get a fine for doing it, but there's a loophole in the law something to do with the car manufacturing industry, that you could run some sort of production line under a big tent. So he built like the world's biggest outdoor tent and basically started manufacturing cars in that tent and caught all the short sellers on surprise because they didn't realise it.
Speaking of short sellers, the interesting article, part of that book about Bill Gates, and he's trying to tap him on the door to start invest, the philanthropic fund, and he's just like, "Are you still short?" And he said, "Well, yeah." Well, and he couldn't understand why he was trying to short one of the biggest movements to green sustainable energy. Yet ask him to donate to green sustainable energy.
Yeah.
He goes, "No thanks, my investment's probably safer and have more impact here with Tesla than it is with you and all your cronies."
Bill was shorting Tesla.
He totally was, $500 million worth of shorts. And he said, "How can I give you money when you're short the biggest environmental movement? You just want to make money. I'm trying to make change."
Yeah.
So fuck off.
But what did you think about that? Like the Bill Gates basically asking him to make those big donations while being short $1.5 billion of his stock.
I thought exactly what Elon did. It's like, I don't get it.
Like, is he crazy? Like,
yeah, Elon
for a smart guy, for Bill Gates is a smart guy, but it seems like there's no social.
I think Bill Gates might have a touch of, like psychotic, unable to have that empathy with humans to understand you're standing in front of a guy asking him for something while you're shorting his company. I mean, it was pretty crazy.
Makes no sense.
But that story about the second production line they built in the car park, they did use an exemption in California law, a loophole that hadn't been used since World War II, but it was really to actually construct automobiles outside of the factory, and they did it so they could build the warplanes when the war was on, and then they gravity fed the bodies down unused train lines or something while they were finishing it. Just an incredible. I love the story also where Elon would literally go down every robot inside of the factory and he would stand and watch the robot. And when he first built those, because the book's a lot about the machine that builds the machines and how Elon was one of the first at scale to really realize it wasn't just about building the cars, it was about building the factory or the automation that builds the cars. And when he went down the production line and he realized that some of these tasks, he watched the robot struggling with one particular task and he asked the operator, "Stop the machine, let me go in and try and do the task." And he did it in a split second compared to the machine. So he said, "Right, that machine's got to be in the car park by sundown." And he started replacing machines with humans. And that one story about where he was watching the screws go in to install one of the pieces, and he goes, "Why is that thing so slow? Like, why is it doing 3 turns backwards and then it's slowly winding the screw in?" And nobody could give him an answer. And he said, "Who can get into that box that controls the machine?" And he said, "I'm not moving until somebody can open the box." And they opened the box, they hacked the software that was controlling the robot and said, "Oh, well, when it was delivered from the factory, it was programmed to be only working at 30% capacity and for some weird reason to do 3 turns backwards before it does any forward turns." And so he had his coders reprogram the robot, sped it up and saved so much time. And he did that all the way along the production line. And his basic thesis was, people are dumb that make this stuff. We're smarter, so let's not assume anything. And then just went through that production line. That you can't pay a CEO, if you're a public company, you can't pay a guy enough or a girl enough to be that committed to.
And just on that,
shareholders.
On that note, talking about optimizing as he went through there, laughing like a child with that chuckle and putting orange paint across all the machines as he left. He's taken that ethos to all of his business. Cut until you got to put 10 or 20% back. You haven't cut enough until you put him back. And so he did that across Twitter, clearly, from 8,000 staff to 2,000 staff. All these companies goes in there and slash and burn until you put the actual the most minimal viable product to make the object or software work. So
that story with those screws, he asked them to set the setting to 100%, and then it started ruining the screws. So he's like, "Okay, put it back to 90%. He's like, "If we're not going back 10% of the time and fixing mistakes, we haven't pushed hard enough in the first place." So just that willingness to always be pushing forward.
Yeah, it's really like refreshing, and we'll talk in a second about Dealbook and the waves that's making. But imagine being a CEO of a Fortune 500 company in America, and you're sitting there watching this, and then all of a sudden Twitter gets acquired, and he goes in and fires, like, I don't know what it was, but it was 70-80% of the workforce. And guess what? It still works. Mm-hmm. And somebody posted that on Twitter, and Elon responded, "Better." So it not only still works, but it actually works better with most of it gone. And that would have really, I think a lot of corporate CEOs right now in America are, especially in the tech sector, are really reevaluating from first principles, what does it take to run this company? Because all of them are incentivized towards shareholders, as they should be. And someone like Elon's come in from, as an engineer, engineering first, and he's really just redefining, what's possible out there.
Yeah. Hey, separate story. I like Walter talks about how much Elon loves to play video games. What did you guys think of the strategy video games and stuff that Elon plays and getting addicted to those video games? Because sometimes I think I need a break from entrepreneurship, but you go and meditate and your mind is still like buzzing and the meditation just doesn't work. And I think maybe you need that focused break playing a video game. Maybe I should go back to playing some strategy video games.
Maybe. I've never been a gamer, so I can't really comment.
I used to play football manager games, but I haven't played them since.
I've never been a gamer either, but a lot of the people that I know that are a lot smarter than me are gamers, funny enough. So I think it's that kind of techie background,
I thought what might be fun, guys, just while we're talking about Elon, Greg, can you cue up the drag race between the 911 and the new Cybertruck?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
I mean, one of the principles that was so strong with the book was Elon was like, and Alex Hormozi says the same thing. You can either spend 2 years building an average product and then the rest of your life selling it, or you can spend 2 years building an amazing product and then your customers will sell it for you for the rest of your life. Elon doesn't advertise. He just, and the story's in there about when he acquired Solar City, which was run by his cousins. And he said he used to hate that business, which was selling solar panels, because they had to go door to door and do all these schemes and salespeople. And coming from Tesla, he's like, I'm just going to build the world's best car, and then they're going to beat a pathway to my door. And in Elon's world, like the commercial, this isn't even a commercial. This would have cost what you're about to see. I reckon this would have cost less than 20 grand, right, to make what you're about to see. But most car people around the world have probably seen this. Let's just run this video. It's amazing, and then we'll talk about it. All right, you can stop it there, Greg.
How bad do you want a Cybertruck?
Yeah, like
I want a Cybertruck.
I know, like when you see that, for those of you who are listening at home and not seeing the video here of YouTube, that was a Cybertruck, the first pickup truck that Tesla has ever made. Keep that in mind. This is the first time they've entered this category, and it is lined up next to a Porsche 911, and you don't see right till the end, but it not only beat the 911, but it beat the 911 towing a 911 behind it. That's amazing.
That's incredible. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
And it's 0 to 60 mile an hour, and their torque was 2.6 seconds. I think it does 2.67 with or without the trailer. Like the trailer's irrelevant. Like
Wow.
it didn't miss like the tenth of a second.
Such a powerful lesson for entrepreneurs, right? Like, if you create something incredible, whether it's a service or whether it's a product, that's truly remarkable. Like as Seth Godin says, purple cow, everything else will be much, much easier. And I found my years of teaching people about selling products on Amazon, the biggest challenge was they were okay, but they weren't great. And it's so powerful.
We fall into that trap though, right? Like for the last 3 years, I've been building my Amazon business, and you fall into the trap of trying to hack Amazon. You go and read a book like that from Elon Musk, and I recommend everyone read the Steve Jobs book as well if they haven't. And you immediately want to start focusing on the product and be a better product builder. It's something that can be really fulfilled, and it's going to be rewarding because people will just come.
It's in that obsession, isn't it? It's in the details of just being absolutely committed to the process.
Yeah.
And that's something, even with this pod, like the amount of energy and time and effort that has gone into getting just to today. But we now know the work is ahead of us in the detail of every aspect of what we do. And you see some of the leading pods in the world. It's that obsession with excellence. It makes it more fun. It enables you to attract A players and keep them. and it enables you to get a sense of like meaning and so on from the business.
Yeah.
Very powerful clip. Hats off to Elon.
I would love to know how many people are now buying a Cybertruck after watching that,
Well,
because I'm one of them
I'm
for
buying
sure.
one.
Yeah.
I used to think the Cybertruck looked quite average, to be honest with you. Very, I don't know, not my type whatsoever for a vehicle. But after watching that clip, I'm like, I'm definitely on the list to get one for sure.
Have you watched the reviews online from some of like the Top Gear?
I've watched some of them.
Yeah, there's like a review site now got 17 million views on there, and I've watched it and I've sent it to 4 people, and it's like it's not just a hunk of metal; it's their own special type of stainless steel they manufactured. It's a lightweight. It's not actually heavy. It like deceives the eyes. Turns on a dime. Like
It's bulletproof.
It's
like Joe
incredible.
Rogan, what was it with the spear, wasn't it?
Yeah, Joe Rogan said I could put my one of my arrows.
Yeah,
through it,
arrow.
you know.
That's it. Yeah.
Every time I tell someone I want to get the Cybertruck, I'm like, it's bulletproof. And they're like, why does that matter? I'm like, I don't know. It just does.
Exactly. It just does.
Because I'm
It
a
does.
boy.
It's
It matters.
bulletproof.
But not only that, from the safety perspective, and they went through some of these reviews, not only that, the Model X and Model Y are the 2 safest cars in the world, full stop, over Volvo or any of those other crazy cars that were sold on the safety aspect. That he's nailed A, safety, but B, energy, and C, style, speed, sport, the whole shebang. Like he hasn't just nailed one aspect of that car or the car industry, he's nailed the whole bang. So it's incredible.
While he's launching rockets and satellites and solar companies, like boring holes under cities, and
He's actually using that same steel that he's using for the Cybertruck for his rockets as well.
yeah,
Wow.
it's crazy.
Their own,
I mean, he
own
sent
grade
it-
of stainless.
He sent a Tesla in orbit
Yeah,
Yeah.
here's
The
a-
Roadster.
you know, with an astronaut, fake astronaut in the driver's seat. Like,
I think it'd be fair to
Who
say
does
we're all fanboys on the podcast.
Yeah, love him.
So short story, guys, get the book. It's fantastic. It's available on Audible. It's available on Amazon. If you are an entrepreneur, you're aspiring to be an entrepreneur, it's phenomenal. There's another Elon Musk book on there as well on Amazon. Anything Elon Musk is amazing. He's certainly got his flaws, but he's also such an incredible example in all the areas that really are important from a business standpoint.
I look at him as our modern day Albert Einstein. So I'm glad he's, I'm alive and seeing something like that.
He is
and
definitely
experiencing.
our industrialist, right?
Yeah.
Like he's a cross between Henry Ford
Yes.
and Albert Einstein
Definitely.
all in one. We're lucky to have somebody alive like that right
agree.
now, in my opinion.
I think he's quite funny too. Like he's actually entertaining to
Oh,
watch.
totally. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. While we're on the subject of Elon, we're going to move off him soon, but I think there's some very fascinating movements happening in the world right now, in this post-COVID world. And one of them is this story that's unfolding with the takeover of Twitter and X. For those who are not across the story, Elon bought it for I think it was $43 billion US. And there's a lot more to that story than just a billionaire buying a platform. And Elon broke the internet a couple of weeks ago at the Dealbook Summit in New York, where he basically stuck the middle finger up to corporate America. We might just play the clip. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's only a very short clip where he's on stage with Sorkin, and they're talking about, that's the one, on stage with Sorkin. And for a little bit of context, Elon says things from time to time which are controversial. And big advertisers are saying, look, Elon, you can't say those things if you want us to advertise on Twitter. And some even went as far as to suggest that Elon should go round to advertisers that had left Twitter on the basis of what Elon said in his personal life and apologize in order to get them to come back to Twitter and spend their big corporate dollars on the platform in advertising. So this clip is where Sorkin basically asks Elon, is there any truth to the rumors that you are going to go on an apology tour and apologize to the advertisers that you lost for statements that you made as a private citizen in your private life? So let's see what Elon had to say about that.
What was that trip like? And obviously, you know that there's a public perception that, and you're clarifying this now, but there's a public perception that that was part of a apology tour, if you will. That this had been said online. There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger today.
I hope they stop.
You hope?
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go yourself.
But
Go yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience.
Well, let me ask you then.
That's how I feel. Don't advertise.
All right, let's just pause it there.
How do you think then about the economics?
So, Elon's basically, who he's referring to there in the audience is Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, and among those who believe that Elon should rein it in. I mean, it's pretty ironic trying to bribe a guy worth whatever he's worth, $200 or $300 billion with money. What was your take on that? Like, what did you make of that statement in front of, given who's in that audience? Like, you've got some serious power players in that audience. How did it make you feel when you saw that clip?
I think it's hard to know whether Elon premeditates this stuff or not, or just comes up with it off the cuff. But I think it's empowering to see someone stand up for their beliefs. Like, I think everyone's getting a little bit tired of the cancel culture. And when you're the richest man in the world, I think by definition, you really shouldn't be giving in to cancel culture and things like that. It's like, I think you were posting on Instagram, it's the true definition of,
fuck you
F
money.
you money, right?
Yeah. Why have fuck you money if you never get to say fuck you?
Exactly. I thought it was, and then if you went on Twitter afterwards, you'd see so many big high-profile celebrities actually jumped on board and said the same thing. We're cancelling our Disney subscriptions. We're done as well. So
Yeah, the ironic part was Bob Iger was on that morning on DealBook prior to that. So it was pretty fresh of what Bob had said. It wasn't like a 3-week-old article. It was that morning. So it went, premeditated probably to a degree, but it was like a whole lot of, you fucked me off and have it.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it was quite a seminal moment. I think this is huge because I think in a post-COVID world, so many people are starting to really understand now, because this was sort of the crisis of our generation. Like, we didn't have a world war, we didn't have any of that stuff, but it was the first time we started to really see the influence of governments in our real lives and big business, and the importance that if big business is buying the news cycle and is paying for what we get to see and how we get to hear things, we now connect the dots of what that can actually cost us at a very personal level. And so Elon standing up to big business saying, you know what, fuck you guys. Like, we are tired of your bullshit. We are not going to be silenced. We're not going to quieten down to make sure that you can still sell your products and service and that we get in line like mainstream media has done. And you can't bribe me with money. And I think it was like in a battle where, you plant that flag on new ground and the world has sort of rallied around that flag, whether you agree with his politics or you don't, or whether you agree with his views or not. I think everybody now understands we need free press. You can't have a functioning democracy without free press. Like, it's not a real thing. So I think him going on there and just planting that in the ground, because Disney is one of those companies that, we have entrusted our kids with Disney. What a brand, right? Parents are advocating your products for generations, and their numbers are tanking because they are bringing a woke agenda to things. Like the saying goes, go woke, go broke. But, when it comes to kids, parents are now stepping in and saying, look, all that stuff I want you to deal with. That's the domain of me. It's not the domain of Disney. It's me as the parent that parents my child. And I don't trust you with my kids anymore because of the agenda that you're pushing. And I think, and we'll watch another clip in a moment where Elon really goes a bit deeper, and this was the part that was more interesting. But Eric, I'd love to get your take on this as well. Like, how important was that? I mean, it's funny to see Elon say, go fuck yourself, but there's actually a much more powerful message at play here.
Honestly, for me, it's refreshing for someone to have the balls to say that,
Yeah.
Live. Because I think a lot of people don't speak the truth because of the effect it has on the money in their back pocket. And when you're the richest man in the world and you paid $43 billion for Twitter as an example, and him to say, go fuck yourself, he really doesn't give a shit. It's very, very clear that whether they pay for the sponsorship or not, he doesn't need them. And I think in future, they're going to need him a lot more than he needs them now. And I think he premeditates this stuff, to be honest. I really, really do. This is what I was discussing with you before, like the whole buying of Twitter and changing it to X. And, you know, to me, controversy equals eyeballs, right? Like, Greg, I don't know if you could pull it up, but how many views has this video had?
There's probably a few cuts of it.
Yeah.
Right. Like
I don't know if that's the
I don't know which ones,
2.8.
but there'd be
tens of millions,
tens of
hundreds
millions
of millions,
views,
yeah.
right? At the end of the day. So, like, if Bob's going to go and speak back about that, it ain't going to have half as many views, you know?
And I think it coming from a guy that people know he sleeps on the production line with the workers, that, you know, this is an industrialist. He's not a banker. He's not somebody who makes money by making up paper and trade. This is a dude that builds things and adds values to people. Whether you think EVs are good for the environment, whatever, this is a dude that actually makes real stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that adds a lot of weight, cred.
And I think when he took it over and had 8,000 staff, pulled it back to 2,000 and said, funnily, you don't need that many people to run a live chat. And I don't know with the profitability, you'd probably know a bit more about this, but, you know, I think it's closer to profit than it's ever been when it was public to where it is now. And yet you still get people, even after this, and you've got that swell, you know, that following now, people are saying, you know, go fuck yourself is the hashtag of people boycotting Disney. But, you know, you still get articles like today from Business Insiders. You know, Elon Musk's luck's finally run out, and they're talking about his overconfidence and risk-taking and, you know, this financial strain on Twitter, and that because of his you know, his comments like this, and he's so tightly financially stuck with Twitter, Tesla, if that takes a slide, that's going to have a cascading effect on Twitter. And it's like, you know, the guys on the All In podcast, all his mates, you just don't bet against Elon. I mean, the thing's financially viable now, so why is it going to take a slide after a comment like that? I think it's only going to gather momentum.
Like you said, he doesn't care. He actually doesn't give a fuck. I mean, he's there to create good products. And he goes into his ventures knowing that there's a high probability of failure, but he does it to advance the world forward in sustainable energy or in space travel. That's his goal, to move the world forward. I don't think, I mean, you know, there's part of him, of course, that wants to do it, but I think he would also take satisfaction out of seeing other people move the world forward as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the patents. Like, he's turned all his patents over to the public. Like, he's not trying to. You can't accuse the guy of hoarding stuff. And he is, as you know, I saw Chamath Palihapitiya on Fox. I think it was one of the big shows in San Francisco, and the mainstream media guy interviewing him was intent on trying to talk to him about Elon smoking weed on the Rogan show or all this stuff. And Chamath just cut the guy off and said, "Listen, mate, you're talking about window dressing here." He said, "Let me ask you a question. You look out in the bay here in San Francisco Harbor." He says, "You can see that if I put a pontoon out there and we got a one wood each and tried to drive a golf ball and land it in a teacup in the middle of San Francisco Bay and I gave you 1 million shots, how many times do you reckon you get it in the cup?" And he goes, "I don't think I'd get in the cup once." He said, "Exactly. You're talking about a guy who does that over and over and over with rockets and lands them on the equivalent of a pinhead in the middle of the ocean so you can reuse them. And you're talking to me about whether he was out of line smoking weed on the Rogan show that's completely legal." He says, "Ask me some serious questions or the interview's over." Yeah. And that's what we need to get people focused now. And I think the world has woken up a lot, and that's why we love Elon so much.
He creates the impossible possible, you know, and that's the exciting thing about him, you know. And I think that's why he's getting the views. And like, you look at what you just said, Mark, and said there was multiple people after that's boycotting Disney, right? Stars, famous people, whoever they are. Would they have done that without him saying, "Go fuck yourself"? You wouldn't have heard about it. They wouldn't have done it. So the influence that he has, whether you like him or not, is very, very powerful.
Enormous. Let's just play that clip a little bit further on. This is the part that's really interesting, and then we're going to move off Elon. And this is where he's talking about the bet that's basically being made. This is a game of poker. What you'll see is I don't think the interviewer here is even close to understanding what Elon's getting, because he's a muppet that works for mainstream media versus a guy who has a truly global business and understands that he's walking across multiple dimensions at the same time. But let's watch the clip and we'll come back.
No, actually, what this advertising boycott is going to do, it's going to kill the company.
And do you think that
and the whole world will know that those advertisers killed the company, and we will document it in great detail.
But those advertisers, I imagine, are going to say, they're going to say, we didn't kill the company.
Oh, yeah?
They're going to say,
Tell it to Earth.
but they're going to say, Elon, that you killed the company because you said these things and that they were inappropriate things and that they didn't feel comfortable on the platform, right? That's what they're going to say.
And let's see how Earth responds to that.
Okay, this goes back to
We'll both make our cases,
right?
and we'll see what the outcome is.
What are the economics of that for you? I mean, you have enormous resources, so you can actually keep this company going for a very long time. Would you keep it going for a long time if there was no advertising?
I mean, if the company fails because of an advertiser boycott, it will fail because of an advertiser boycott. And that will be what bankrupted the company, and that's what everybody on Earth will know.
Well, what do you think then of the... this goes back to the idea of trust, though.
Then it'll be gone. And it'll be gone because of an advertiser boycott.
But you recognize that some of those people are going to say that they didn't feel comfortable on the platform. And I just wonder and ask you and think about that for a second.
Tell it to the judge.
But the judge is going to be...
The judge is the public.
And you think that the public is going to say that Disney is making a mistake?
Yes.
And they're going to boycott Disney?
They already are.
Well, there are some that are for lots of different reasons.
Okay,
but you
stop
think
it
that
there.
this is going to...
So you can see this is a game of poker, right? Like we all play poker together. This is a game of poker. And Elon is raising the stakes and he's going all in on the idea of this is me taking a stand with a $43 billion poker chip. I am quite willing to lose it all and let the public... The guy interviewing him, Andrew, didn't even really get who the judge was. He just straight over his head.
When he says things like the judge is the public or let the chips fall where they may, that's when I look at Elon and say he is premeditating this because he understands intimately how his following and his fan base will respond to this kind of thing. It's incredible.
It's so fascinating to watch. You know, I personally am a huge fan of what he's doing at Twitter X because there is no other platform at that scale that is not controlled by corporate interests and money. When you look behind it all, you don't even have to look hard. Who's paying for the ads? That's it. It's pretty simple. All right, moving on. Let's get off Elon. We are big Elon fans here. We're going to move to the next story, which is Tucker Carlson. Still in the US. We're going to bring it home today with a story out of Australia. But for those of you who don't know Tucker Carlson, because we recognise a lot of you guys are Australian, New Zealand, if you don't follow US politics or US happenings, Tucker Carlson was the biggest, highest rated news anchor in the United States on Fox, $20 million a year salary. And he was fired in April of this year without any reason. So this is the Rupert Murdoch empire. And obviously, since he's gone off the air, when you are the number one guy in the country, it's going to raise a lot of eyebrows, a lot of interest in what you're going to do next. And news broke on Saturday out of the US that Tucker is starting his own subscription media company, basically, where you pay a fee annually or monthly to subscribe to his content. Very curious guy. He was recently on the All In pod. And it's been a bit of fun, you know, because watching this, obviously, if you're a mainstream media company and the number one guy has gone rogue and is going to start his own thing, and you have no control over the guy that was inside the Murdoch empire at the highest level, it's going to, and a guy that has openly expressed his curiosity for subjects that you would never have explored on Fox, many of which are against their sort of policy. Things get a bit nervous. And I'll just play one quick clip, which is a bit of fun, that just shows you how it's stirring a certain segment of the US. This is him. You're going to say something?
It's a perfect example of why we need people like Elon to buy Twitter, right?
Right, exactly. And he did initially do some shows on Twitter because he could say what he wanted without fear of being censored. So this is a clip from UFC just recently entered the room with a couple of characters that certainly got a segment of American voters very excited. So let's take a look.
How strong that team is, making his way into the building. One of the bigger mixed martial arts fans I know, President Donald Trump, taking his octagon side seat for UFC 295. We got two title fights coming up at UFC 295 here in a matter of moments, live from Madison Square Garden.
All right, that's enough.
Is that Kid Rock?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is Kid Rock.
That's Kid Rock, Donald Trump, and probably the most loved, I think, and widely respected CEO in corporate America.
Dana.
In Dana White. Like, he is.
We need to do a show on Dana one day.
We
He's
need to do it.
incredible.
That guy is a boss.
Yeah.
Like, he is just the greatest.
He too recently just told advertisers to go jump for trying to muzzle him, and he said he's using Peloton gear now, all about gyms, right? Get them out, fuck them off, they're gone.
Yeah.
Just cut them.
Dana's
alive.
told a lot of people to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people have doubted Dana over the years, but what he's done with UFC, like in his office in the UFC arena, it says, "God help my enemies, because I sure as hell won't." You know, and for those of you who didn't recognise, Tucker walked in with them, and so you can imagine the nervousness when you see a guy who was the number one trusted news guy in mainstream media has left and is now walking into an arena with Donald Trump. That's going to have all kinds of repercussions politically, media-wise, business-wise, and so on.
I think it was Patrick Bet-David that was tipping that Tucker would eventually run for president. Seeing that makes me think that he might be onto something.
Or at least there's a lot of talk that he might run as Donald's, running mate.
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
So, and Pat actually offered $100 million to Tucker to come and join Valuetainment, which at the time I thought, man, that's a lot of cash. But then as I've learned more about the clout of the guy, you realise that could be a great investment.
Definitely.
But it's interesting, the reason we're covering this on here, guys, is because one of the things with Unemployable is we want to really start to expand your minds at home about the world that we're moving into and the opportunities that this new world presents. And a lot of time when I know where you're listening to this right now, whether you're on the train coming into work, going home from work, at the gym, but it's so easy for us to have our minds constrained to the 5 kilometre radius in which we do 80% of our living, our home, our supermarket, our gymnasium, our job, 5, 10Ks, whatever it is. And we forget there's a big, big world out there. And those entrepreneurs that are staying in touch with the scale of the planet and the opportunities that are available today. We're going to talk later in the pod about, immigration and how it's impacting opportunities and all this sort of stuff. But at the same time that there is this negative data and this negative sentiment, perhaps for millennials coming up with house prices and all these things, at the same time, there is unprecedented opportunities. Just to give you a couple of stats out of the article, Greg, you can throw it on the screen while I'm talking, the Variety article, it was announced in the press everywhere. No, next one, you'll see it's from variety.com with Tucker. But anyway, you'll find that and throw it up. But basically, the headline is it's $72 a year to subscribe to the channel, which is about $6 a month. When they do open it, it'll be $90 a month normally. What I found interesting in the article is that it says here that the company, this is Tucker Carlson Network, TCN, it was funded with a $15 million funding led by 1789 Capital, which is an anti-woke investment fund founded by investment banker Omid Malik. This is what I love about America, that there is actually VC funds committed just to anti-woke companies. Like in Australia, we have a very limited VC scene by comparison. So they've basically given Tucker and his business partner $15 million to launch the channel. That's the article there. You can see it coming up there. But for those of you who don't know how, look, most people in Australia, they sort of understand how much money OnlyFans girls make. But that's that's one level. But these guys that are going independent media now are making huge dollars. Like some of you might have heard of Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro has a far-right show called The Daily Wire. He's got some really talented people on that show, and including Jordan Peterson, Candace Owens, people like that. There was just revealed those guys now have 1 million subs, paying them $185 a year to subscribe to their private media. Right? Think about that. That's $185 million a year, producing content that speaks to mostly the anti-woke agenda, political. Leaning definitely to the right. But for people listening at home, it makes you understand that these days you can distribute content, products, and so on globally, when you start to see these massive macro shifts. And one of them, of course, is media dying. What do you make of it, guys? What's your thoughts on Tucker's move? Do you think it's a logical thing? I personally think it was a very logical move.
I think it's a very good move. It goes to show you, like you look at the Ben Shapiro numbers, 185 million. People might think he's crazy not taking the 100 million from PBD, but I don't think it's going to take him long to get a few million followers, paying $72. There's a couple hundred mil just there. Again, Tucker Carlson, I think, is a man of his word. He's very similar to Elon as an example, right? They're controversial. Controversy gets eyeballs. And I read an article, and it was, again, controversial one, that he went to a Hells Angels president's funeral because he wanted to honor a man who spoke true words. And he used words like stay loyal, remain free, and always value honor, and to me, that's Tucker Carlson, that's Elon Musk. These are the new guys that are inspiring people to actually believe in themselves and help people speak up, because there's a lot of people out there that are walking the streets with their mouths closed because they don't want to be judged. And the more of these people that come out and, give people the motivation and the inspiration to feel like it's okay to speak the truth, I'm all for that.
Tucker must be feeling like a free man because, you can imagine the advertisers would have shit their pants if there was Tucker Carlson at a Hells Angels.
Yeah.
But, imagine the financial repercussions of the drug companies trying to virtue signal to mainstream America.
Yeah, but like remain free.
Yeah.
And
that's why he's doing what he's doing.
It's powerful, right?
And fair play to him, like the brand equity he built off the back of Fox and the way they treat him. It's like, well, hang on, I've got an entrepreneurial bone in me as well. We'll see how this pans out. And you said a couple of eyeballs. The amount of eyeballs that he's got is huge. Which was evidence.
It's massive.
Which was evidenced on X. So that's and then he'll have complete agency over the content that he wants to deliver, which from a few of the naysayers could be like an echo chamber effect. But I think he'll nurture that audience quite well.
I think he's smart enough to surround himself with dissenting voices as well.
Well, you look at someone like, just on that point as well, not to digress too much off Tucker, but Piers Morgan said the same thing. He's the UK version of Tucker effectively, and he's mainstream media groomed from the get-go, and he's now got Piers Morgan Uncensored. And he was just commenting to your point about the different outlets now, that the pull from YouTube is like 10x, 20x than the mainstream media channels that he's usually been hosting.
Yeah, well, there's just some data for the people at home listening. It's Fox News gets about 1.5 million viewers at prime time. So if you times that by 30 days, right, for the month, they're getting about 45 million viewers a month at prime time. The Joe Rogan show gets 11 million listeners per episode, and he does on average 15 a month. So he's getting 165 million, which is 4 times larger than the largest TV network at prime time in the United States. And what Joe might have 15, 20 people on the team versus Fox News Corporation, who were paying Tucker alone $20 million a year just for Tucker, let alone all the infrastructure costs of the entire news machine behind him. It's just mind-blowing.
Well, you look at Piers Morgan. Why does he use that word uncensored?
Exactly.
Right? Because that's what people want.
Yeah.
People want uncensored because they're sick of everything being censored, one-sided. People want to see both sides, right? Like they say, there's, 2 sides to a story and then the truth somewhere in the middle. That's what people want to see.
Very, very interesting time. So for all of you entrepreneurs out there, one of the things that we look for is always these big shifts, global shifts in how things are working. There's never been more capital available. There's never been, bigger opportunities. It's why you're in healthcare, right? It's why you're in certain businesses that you're in. You're actually moving into the wellness space, right? So we're getting into where the puck is going, not where it is today, but where it's going. And this is just yet another example of that. And I think, when you're building a brand, we're starting to see those sort of shifts in the way people are presenting brands, the way they're marketing. We're seeing much more, connective type of marketing these days than what we've seen in the past. Let's move on to Australian immigration to close it off. I made a post earlier this week on my Instagram. And Greg, you might just want to bring this up. This is a video I posted by a famous Australian called Dick Smith. So for those of you who do not live in Australia or maybe New Zealand, Dick Smith very famous Australian entrepreneur, had a chain of electronic stores called Dick Smith Electronics. Later on, when Vegemite was sold, Vegemite is a very famous. I mean, what did you think of the first time you had Vegemite, Eric? What?
I licked it off a popsicle stick on its own, and I hated it. And every time I tell the story, it's like, that's not the way you're supposed to eat it. It's the first time it touched my tongue, and it's the last.
So anyways, when Vegemite was sold to Chinese interest, I think it was Chinese interest, Dick Smith started Aussie Mite to try and keep it manufactured in Australia and as well as many other things like ketchup and things that have been offshored. But anyways, he's a well-loved Australian. A lot of people would refer to him as a boomer. But we might just watch this. He did this. This is on 60 Minutes, where he spoke about immigration in Australia, and then I'm going to get your thoughts and talk about this for a minute. Let's roll.
Our immigration down to 70,000 a year, which is the long-term average. Our population would level off at about 30 million, and that's what we should be doing.
By holding that position, as you do, that immigration numbers are almost 3 times too much, some of your critics will say you're racist.
Yes, it's got nothing to do with racism. It's just common sense. One day we'll have to stop growing, even if that's when we get to 1 billion people. We should be discussing it now, and my belief is we should stop the growth now if we want to have a quality of life for our children and grandchildren. When I bought my house, Pip and myself, we bought a house that cost $32,000 in Sydney in 1970. And I think it was about 4 times the annual salary. Now it's over double or even more than that. Young couples can't afford a house with a block of land where the kids can play in a cubby house. That's wrong. We should never have got into that situation where young couples are forced into high-rise like termites. The kids are no longer free-range kids like I was. You're a sort of a battery hen. I mean, we spend $50 million a year to get free-range chooks. What about our kids?
All right, let's stop it there. So, when I posted that video, it's had thousands of shares, and my Instagram account is not that big, right? It's under 50,000. So it's had over 2,000 shares, over 880 comments, and a lot of heated debate in the comments. It's really hit a nerve, and I think, there's an article, which Greg will bring up in a second there, we're based around an interview that Ben Fordham did with our Prime Minister Albanese, and he was talking about the current immigration rate. This past 12 months is over 500,000 people making Australia home for the very first time this last year, according to Abdul Rizvi, the former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Immigration. It is 500,000 migrants will have moved to Australia in the year to September, which is considerably over our long-term average. We might just quickly play the video if we can on this page, and then we're going to chat this through. So let's have a listen to Ben. Of course, we've got an ad. We'll skip the ad in a second. All right.
500,000 people moved to our country in the 12 months to September. And just remember, we're not talking about tourists or people on a business trip. This is 500,000 people who've packed up their lives and now call Australia home. It's a rate we've never seen before in the history of this country. And with the Reserve Bank considering an interest rate rise on Melbourne Cup Day, some of our leading economists are warning our migration levels are adding pressure on inflation. Paul Bloxham is the chief economist at HSBC. He used to work at the Reserve Bank. He's told the Financial Review, our estimates suggest that a positive shock to migration is net inflationary in the short run. Our view is the cash rate will increase by 25 basis points in November. And he's not alone. Westpac's chief economic advisor, Lucy Ellis, says domestic demand pressures are still driving inflation. Strong population growth is a factor here.
All right, so that's Ben. I'm going to get your thoughts in a minute. And keeping in mind, as we sit here today, there's 4 of us at the desk, and we got Greg, our awesome producer, sitting back there. 2 of the 3 of us are 2 of the 5 of us have immigrated here. And the rest of us are basically convicts whose parents came out here as immigrants a while ago. So with that backdrop, what do you guys make of this? I mean, Dick's got a pretty extreme view and trying to cap it at 30 million. My personal view is I think that's a little bit low. And I think Australia has been built on immigration. And immigrants, in my view, bring a whole bunch of value. But Is it too much with the housing crisis shortage? Is it a real thing that Aussies are losing jobs to immigrants? What do you make of these sort of factors? How much of it's real? How much of it's xenophobic and imagined? What are your thoughts? So let's turn it over to.
I mean, there's a few questions that I have around it that I'd like to understand a little bit deeper. Like, is it skilled migrants that are coming into the country that we need more nurses? Are they majority of them nurses? Why is the number so high? It looks like, after the war, the migration numbers were high. Now after COVID, the migration numbers are high. I'd like to get some explanation from our leaders as to why these numbers are so high. I mean, there are some theories out there that they're trying to underpin the property market, that they don't want a property market crash, and that they're trying to underpin the economy. And taxpayer revenue and migration is one way to grow your GDP, right? So maybe there needs to be a little bit more communication around that. But no doubt it's a high number, and when people are missing out, my sister and brother-in-law were missing out on auctions for months and months and months, and getting outbid by people from who have migrated from other countries. Now, they're not racist, but they were disappointed to be missing out, and they're wondering why they're being outpriced. So I don't know, I can kind of see it from both avenues, but I'd love to know from our leaders a little bit deeper as to why the number is so high.
I think you sort of answered it. If they're outbidding your family, they probably are skilled. They're not just labour, right? Like there's some definitely skilled labour coming in. But what are your thoughts, James?
There's obviously fors and against, and there's a housing shortage. Who's going to build them? But then it's like the migrants come in, and you've got to build housing for them as well. So it's like, where does it end? But then there's also the social challenges that come with it as well right now. Like we've got people living in cars, we've got people going without healthcare to a degree, even though we've got allegedly one of the better healthcare policies in the world. But where's the resource allocation go to people who are currently Aussies, if you will, or the people are coming in? It's going to be tight on all fronts, not just in that housing perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that gap, the gap for our young people is a bit concerning. The home ownership rates for millennials where they are today are less than half of what they were for the boomers, because kids today can't just. It takes, I've got the data actually in a video we're doing shortly, but I think it takes 3 times as long now to save a deposit. I think it's something like 13 or 14 years. I've got the data. I should have had it here today, but as opposed to 3 years for boomers coming up. So I can understand why the millennials are finding it tough and in some ways angry. I don't know that they can be angry at boomers for that. Boomers didn't make the property prices go up. But I understand their frustration in not, and especially given that they can see that most of the wealth the boomers created originated from the equity in their home, and why today most of the wealth in this country and many others is controlled by that one section of our community. There's discussions around definitely the opportunities are probably much broader and bigger for millennials. But you're a numbers guy, Eric, and you're in the business of property. How do you see this playing out? Because we do have a housing shortage. That is a real thing. And then when you just add 500,000 families coming in to that housing shortage, and I know you've got some data on other things that affect the housing shortage.
I mean, there's definitely a housing shortage, and I don't think the government has an answer for it. I honestly don't think, because, I did some calculations in the past just on the Gold Coast in regards to population growth, how many homes they're building, how much greenfield land that we have here, how many units they're building, and there was a shortage of about 60,000 units needed for the population growth up to 2041. They just we don't have the resource to build. Like James was saying, you need the people to build them. We don't have the people, but then when we bring the people in, where are they gonna go? Where are they gonna live? To then build the houses that they need to be living in. So I see Australia as a country turning into something similar to Europe. In Europe, majority of the people rent, right? Majority of people aren't buying. They don't have mortgages. And most of the real estate is owned just in less hands. So more of the, which builds wealth. More of the wealthy people will own multiple properties. and majority of the people will just rent. Like if you look at it and you're saying you got to save 13 years for a deposit, but now on average, when it used to be 3, when you hit the 13th year, when you started, what's that property worth now?
Yeah.
You ain't going to get in the market.
Yeah.
Like realistically, unless you're earning big money, or unless you have your parents or someone that has, been in the market for time, because real estate's all about time. I remember buying my first house. It was $155,000. Like that house today is $1.2 million. $155,000 at a 5% deposit, you could scrounge up $7,500, put a deposit, pay $2,500, a couple grand to the solicitor. Well, back then would have been $1,000. 10 grand, you're in a property, and that's just the way I see it.
That's where you see all these different ethnicities having pooled income and having that communal style where they actually load up all wages. One house turns into 2, turns into 3, turns into 4. It's been going on for centuries in certain religious religions. So, and you see it a lot with a lot of the Indian families in Australia coming together. They're living.
They live together. They save their money, and maybe we need to learn a little bit from that.
Yeah,
we are becoming a little bit more like Europe and the other big cities of the world as well. I remember when I started selling land in 2007, there was this amazing statistic that Australia was one of the only countries in the developed world where the house sizes were still getting bigger in greenfields estates. So this is relatively new for Australians to be priced out of the property market and not to be able to afford a home. And so I think there's a real opportunity for millennials and young people to rent vest. So, not necessarily to be able to buy in the areas where you want to live, but rent and then go and buy in the greenfields areas in Queensland or in Melbourne, because there is still some growth to be had in those areas at a lower price point as well.
Yeah.
With that though, you'd have a double whammy, especially places like the Gold Coast. I know specifically the rental market's that short as well. So it's what you go. I'll invest out in Ipswich, those areas like that, Toowoomba. I'm going to rent here. It's like I can't rent here either.
Yeah.
So it's like, well,
Yeah, it is interesting. When I travel, I do see that people are not nearly as fixated on property prices as they are in Australia, because most of them are renters. They're just not something they think about. In the US, it was the same. Like when I was in LA, very few people actually rented it. Certainly not in my circles anyway. Owned. They mostly rented.
I think majority of the wealth in Australia is very different than somewhere like the US. Majority of the wealth is held in property here. You know, in the
Stock
US,
market.
they're big on the stock market as an example, right? So, but I think, people will be displaced. Quality of life will be and is being affected now. And people need to adjust their expectations. What I tell people is buy where you can afford and rent where you want to live.
Yeah.
Because just get in the market. Because you know what, you want to live near the beach, or you want to live, in Broad Beach or Mermaid Waters as an example on the Gold Coast. Most people will not be able to afford there, but at least renting there will be more affordable than buying there. But even renting now is becoming very, very difficult. And I was having a chat with Sam this morning, a good friend of ours, and he's looking at shared housing at the moment. He was looking at maybe moving in with one person, and now he's looking at maybe moving in with a second person. So 3 of them as an example. And this is, to me, this is what people need to do, is adjust their expectations. I went to Canada last year as an example, and there's a big change, a big influx of immigration from people from different countries. And majority of those people are living in shared housing, but not just 3 single guys. I'm talking 2 families, and does that affect quality of life? Damn right it affects quality of life,
Well, you were just telling me this morning about a girl who was living down in Currumbin.
Yep.
And she's on over $100,000 a year.
Yep.
And the rent got upped by 25%.
Yeah, correct.
And now she's gone
north
to Pimpama, which is going to change her commute. She lives in Currumbin, works in Burleigh, and now she has to commute from Pimpama, which is going to be a 40-minute trip at that time of day. That's a massive impact, not to mention demographically very different in Pimpama than Currumbin.
Yeah, correct.
But
I think this is the reality. There's no quick fix.
Yeah.
We have a supply and demand problem. There's people from interstate flocking here still. Because again, property prices there.
Well, this doesn't help, does it? Behind us.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, we've got the beach, we've got the weather, right? Somewhere like Sydney and Melbourne doesn't have that. They've got a lot of other things, but at the same time, I know someone that's bought 60 kilometers away from the city in Sydney, which a friend of mine's like, you wouldn't want to live there. and they've just paid $1.4 million for a 4-bed, 2-bath house. Like $1.4 million still goes a long way on the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And you're not 60 kilometers away from the beach, you know?
But you know, we're going to have this conversation in 5 or 10 years' time, and it's going to be the same price here, 60 k's out from Brisbane. So you know, we have to understand those trends, and and like you said, these are the times we live in, and we have to try and find a way to be involved and to be part of it.
We're changing as a country. I mean, we're a very young country, and I'm sure these types of things probably happened historically in other places, but hundreds or thousands of years ago, we're just sort of evolving and growing up as a nation.
True.
And we are just so blessed in so many ways to be here in Australia. I heard a really interesting theory. I'd love to get your feedback before we wind up the pod. I don't know if it's a theory or a fact, that it made perfect sense to me that we had a gentleman come up for a meeting with Eric and I, and he was talking to us about a thing called the age-sex pyramid. I don't know if you've ever heard of the age-sex pyramid. So the age-sex pyramid, if you saw it as a graph, imagine there's a bar that is at the bottom that goes, you know, that's elongated on its side. And this is 0 to 5-year-olds, and then 5 to 10-year-olds, and then 10 to 15-year-olds. And these bars are stacked on top of each other. And it's supposed to be a pyramid because people get older and die. And then we have a growth rate of 2.7 or 2.6. So we're broadening the base, people are dropping off. And that's sort of how it's supposed to be economically. But here in Australia, when Keating was in and they brought in the superannuation, our boomers were investing their wealth via their super, minimising their tax of 15%, putting it in and tax-free when they pull it out. And so what's happened, and our birth rate has dropped, so below 2%. So there's no widening of the base, and it's becoming a column. And not only is it becoming a column, but our wealthiest segment of that column is not paying tax. So in retirement, because they're pulling it out tax-free, so the tax base is gone. And so in the middle, you've got, you know, these working class, you know, people in the middle, and there's not enough of them to pay for the country. And so as a politician, you want to get voted back in, which is what you talked about, Mark, which is keep the property prices up, you keep Australians happy, right? Yeah. Not all Australians, but you keep, you know, families, I guess, happy. And you saw what happened when the Labor government tried to bring in getting rid of CGT and
abolish negative gearing.
Negative gearing. That they had that election was theirs to lose, and they lost it on that one policy that the people spoke. And so you look at that and you go, well, if you're in government, and I can't imagine the way government people think because I'm an entrepreneur, it's a very different mindset, but you want to get elected again, so you keep the property prices up, you keep the budget in a great place. Yeah. So what better way than bringing in 500,000 skilled immigrants to fill that out? And I'm really torn on it because I'm sitting here today with an amazing producer who's from New York originally. He's been here for 18 years, Greg? 18 years. So he's really Aussie, but he sounds a little bit like New York. He's definitely got the New York cool going on. And you got Eric here, who's a business partner now, who's created massive economic value and jobs for the nation. So I think managed well, it can be good, but I also think there's a real case for, I think it's in experimental territory. When you go from 250 a year to 500,000, and I believe that it's projected to continue at that rate to 2032. You're talking about 4 million new people in the next 8 years. That is a lot of housing. That's a lot of infrastructure stress. That is a lot of stress on a system. And I just hope we don't blow it up. But at the same time, I do know so many small business owners can't get Australians as in to apply for jobs or do a great job. And as a capitalist, I know that competition breeds excellence. And this morning at the coffee shop where I go to all the time, I reckon 80% of the workers there are non-Australian, So it's a really interesting challenge. How do we keep the country growing and thriving and being prosperous and still having that wealth for toil? What I do know for sure is if you cut it off all completely, I don't think there's ever been an instance of that working out that well either. But then you look to America where the border controls none, and look at how that's manifested in homelessness and all sorts of problems. When I was in California, I used to pay my taxes and I'd go, what am I getting for this? Like I went there a full-on unapologetic capitalist, and I came home and was like, oh, actually, I don't mind paying some tax because, I don't want to have those types of problems on my doorstep because the city can't afford to have any programs or support for people when they fall off the bottom of the rung, which happens in America, and then you see it. And I'm seeing it here on the Gold Coast now. Like, we're at Ferry Road Markets 2 days ago, my wife and I, which is a fancy, posh type of joint, and there was a couple of homeless people lying sideways outside of Chemist Warehouse, which if you're in the heart of Sydney, you kind of go, okay, that's what you expect. But on the Gold Coast in Ferry Road Markets, you don't see that.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think, wow, we're not keeping up with the problems. And when I was in Los Angeles, my animation company, I used to walk past 10 homeless people, severe psychiatric problems, in the 20-meter walk from my office door to the coffee shop. And it was just the street smell of urine because the systems didn't cope, which is what I'm worried about.
We're starting to see more of that in Melbourne as well, on Chapel Street. Like every day there's a new homeless person on Chapel Street out the front of the 7-Eleven or the Chemist Warehouse or the Coles asking for money. So, yeah, the problem definitely is getting worse. And it's an interesting point that you touched on before with the population. Like, we're not having enough kids. It's another thing that Elon Musk talks about, that one of the biggest crises that he's facing humanity is that we're not having enough kids and that our population is going to be in decline. So, yeah, I mean, there's no short-term fixes. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
But who's having kids? The Western world aren't having kids.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of cultures still having plenty of kids.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are coming into the countries.
Yeah.
Right? Like Australia and Canada, and they're willing to work and they're willing to live together. And I can guarantee you won't see many of those cultures, right? The ones on the street begging for money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was in LA, culturally, like, I never saw a Mexican that was homeless. Never. Because they're a working culture.
It's funny you say that. There's a guy that I met in Arizona, and he's a real estate coach, and he owns hundreds of properties, and he's got a big real estate coaching program. And in Arizona is a big Mexican population, and he goes, I only rent to Mexicans. I will not rent to a white American person. Proper racist, right? And this is what he said, because he goes, no one takes mama's house away, right? They all chip in, right? Multiple family members, and they all chip in. And he goes, what he called the white American person will sit there and brag about not paying rent over having lunch, and that was his take on it, Again, this is what he said, so it's very interesting, like, not being racist, but obviously his opinion was quite racist,
I mean, I don't think Australians are immune to becoming fat and happy, like we live in such a blessed country, and we've had such abundance. Even if the kids haven't, the parents have. And so when an immigrant arrives in our country, like one of our coaching clients that we just had, Darshan, he's Indian. He came here in 2019 on a student visa, and started a company. Now he has 85 employees. He just finished in the Forbes Under 40, and he's got 5 investment properties. And he just came and worked, like when I went to America, I was the same. I had to make it work to stay there. And so people would comment to me, man, I've never seen somebody come in with so much enthusiasm for the country and work so hard. And I was like, dude, you don't understand it. If I don't hit the goals, my visa, I get booted. I have to create jobs. I have to pay taxes. And if I don't, then there's no beneficial. I'm not beneficial to the US system when you go in legit legally like that. And I was net positive to the US. I think there is I think we need to be very careful not to say, dirty immigrants and all the stuff that this Aussie culture, it's wrong. And at the same time, they need to be skilled and assimilate.
You think of it just for context on a different vein. You think the 4 million by 2032, whatever, that's 8 years circa. That's Perth and Brisbane combined. From a population context, like, okay, well, that's a hell of a feat to build. But if you look at the opportunity there, where's the opportunity? For anyone that wants to have a go in Australia, and that's put on the tool belt and learn a trade potentially, and build a team and get after it. There is a massive abundance ahead for some people should they want to harness that opportunity ahead.
we have to remember that as well, that part of the reason so many people want to come here is because it is such a great place.
Yeah.
You know, you go to even places like Italy and things just don't work. The post system doesn't work. The medical system doesn't work. It's a beautiful place to visit if you've got money and you're a tourist, but things don't work for the average person. And so we're really lucky here. And I think to James's point, we really just need to try and focus on finding that opportunity rather than tearing other people down.
And we have to really question our biases, because sometimes people have biases and they're not tested in reality at all. Like my experience with almost all immigrants that I've met in Australia, whether they be Muslims, Indians, whatever, deeply grateful to be here, kind-hearted, great values. And I think, you know, it's dangerous to assume that they just want to come and take from the system. You know, there's bad apples in every population, including white Australians who probably arguably game the system more than some of the immigrants coming in, you know, because they're like, just used to it, they understand it. I don't know, that's just sort of my thought. It's definitely a pickle that we need to sort of confront, and I think personally we've got to recognise that we often romance the past, and there is some beautiful things in the past, but there's also some beautiful things in the present as well. As Patrick Bet-David says, the future looks bright. I tend to agree.
Again, I think people need to adjust their expectations. And what I mean by this is I went to Europe this summer, right, to celebrate my 40th. I know I look 20, but it was my 40th. And, you know, we stayed in a couple Airbnbs, couple hotels, and like a 2-bedroom Airbnb in the middle of Rome, right, is 50 square meters. Like, it is tiny, you know. Here, a 2-bedroom is still 100 square meters, you know. And that 100 square meter 2-bedroom, as an example, costs a lot more to build, you know. But people need to adjust their expectations and go, you know, I'm not going to be able to afford that, as an example. I'm going to have to live in or buy something a little bit smaller, you know. And I can guarantee you right now, I can pull up Seek live, right? I can pull up realestate.com live, and there will be rentals available and there will be jobs available, right? Until the day that you open up Seek and it goes 0 jobs available, and you go to REA as an example and there's 0 places available, that's what we need to avoid, right? But right now, it's very hard for me to comprehend how someone can sit there, unless they have a psychiatric, you know, issue, and say, you know, and beg for money as an example, when there is work out there. I know lots of business people,
they're all
friends,
consumers.
looking for labor.
They're all consumers. So the people coming in need stuff too, right?
Yeah, you know, so, you know, until the day, you know, it says, you know, 0 available, 0 jobs available, but that's obviously why we, you know, vote governments in to hopefully make the better decisions for the people for that not to happen. But I think just with the immigration and the 500,000 people that are going to be coming in on a yearly basis, whether that comes to fruition or not, all of our quality of life is going to change. Because guess what? It's going to take longer to get to the beach because there's going to be more cars on the road. It's going to, you know, take more time to go and book a restaurant because there's more competition and more people going there, as an example, right? So quality of life will need to be, quality of life isn't going to be what it is today. And all of our expectations, I think, need to be adjusted because it's going to change, you know, very quickly, especially if the government doesn't pick up on infrastructure. Because right now on the Gold Coast, you know, I drive to Brisbane once in a while, right? And we went there last week to go spend some time in Brisbane for the day with the kids. And it took us, you know, hour and 20 minutes to Brisbane. And this was at 9 o'clock. You know, I could just imagine the person that's got to be driving there every day at 6 a.m. taking an hour and a half every day. What's that going to look like in 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, even for the average person as well, I mean, there's certain things that we can control and there's certain things that we can't control. And I think we need to be careful that we don't let the stories and the narratives that we're hearing in the news discourage us from getting out there and having a go. There's many ways to skin a cat. There's many ways to get into the property market. And I just think, you know, sometimes we can get a little bit sidetracked by the narrative and then use that as an excuse to not kind of perform at the level that, you know, we're all capable of doing. So I think that's another point.
Oh, absolutely, Mark. There's never been more wealthy young people than there is today, who Australians, immigrants, or, you know, all kinds that are, even when I was coming up, you know, it's the news cycle. There's so much more news. There's so much more distraction. There's so many different narratives being shoved down our throat. But one thing remains true. Most people are crowded at the bottom of the ladder, not at the excellence end. And if you strive for excellence, if you're a young person listening to this, I really encourage you, read Purple Cow by Seth Godin. There is very few people that are truly outstanding still, who go that extra mile, who are willing to be patient, who are willing to put in the work and the effort, to really make an impact, and who are willing to just do stuff for a little bit for free at the start, because everybody thinks at the start, as Alex Hormozy says, they think their time is valuable when they've got no track record. It isn't. Your time isn't worth anything when you don't have a track record. So don't treat it like it is, and go and impress and network and provide value. And human nature hasn't changed. If you provide genuine, authentic value to somebody that's outstanding, sooner or later, the law of reciprocity is going to kick in. The young guy that's editing our reels, these first reels, I get, on no joke, probably 20 a day of editors around the world saying, can I edit a reel for you? Can I work for you? This kid didn't ask. He actually edited reels for me every day for a week and said, just grabbing my content, right, and just cutting it, and said, this is what I can do. Please give me feedback. And then he's followed me up. He's followed me now for 6 months while we've been trying to get this podcast going. Every week, he's followed me up. His name's Virat, based in India. And he says, I want to work for you. I've seen your profile. I can see you're doing big things. I can see you're doing the podcast. I'll just keep here and I'll keep checking in, sir. That kid now is editing our reels for us, and we're paying him because he kept at it. And he understands that if I do excellence and provide value, it'll come. But he was the only one that followed up. And didn't ask whether he could work. He did the work. And
what did you say there? Followed up?
Followed up, yeah, you know that word.
I think we were discussing that not too long ago.
Yeah, we were. It's just he persisted, and so those things don't cost money. It's just patience. It's providing value. It's just playing that little bit longer game. And so, I do know that if you are bright, the flip side of this is that you have so much access now to information. Talking about Elon. You can go and watch Elon be interviewed. You can learn from a billionaire directly. Like when I was coming up, you heard about a billionaire in the BRW Rich List. Once a year when they put it out, you'd read 2 paragraphs about them, and that was it. They weren't on TV, they weren't on radio, there were no podcasts, nothing. Now you can just fast track. I mean, we launched this podcast. Look where we've started. We've started at such a high level because we have the benefit of being able to watch and access, not only seeing other people do it, but those people now releasing videos behind the scenes showing you how they did it and why they did it. We've saved years.
We have social media now. There's millions and millions of millionaires on social media that you can reach out and ask a question to and basically say, hey, I'm interested in your story. I want to know how you do it. And we all know people love talking about their own story, right? So
and there's platforms, like Clarity.fm and others where you can buy access by the minute.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is the ultimate university if used correctly. I mean,
ChatGPT, YouTube.
You've got everything at your fingertips and it's all free.
Yeah, so rather than worrying about property prices, worry about excellence.
Get in the game.
Yeah, and property prices, I still think for people who are excellent at what they do and are truly embracing change, it's still possible. Admittedly, you might have to be more outstanding now to get there, but my suspicion is that if you're listening to this podcast, that's you.
Yeah.
So you're our audience.
I agree.
So guys, thank you for listening in. We've got one favor to ask of you. If you enjoyed our podcast today, this is our second one, right? The first one we did was introducing ourselves. Just one favor. If you can hit the subscribe button and tell your friends, because I'll make a deal with you. If you do that, we will do everything in our power to make this show better and better and better. In the comments below, tell us what you love. Tell us what you'd like to hear more of. If you like one of the guys and what they said, let them know, because we're sitting here in a room on the Gold Coast with absolutely zero feedback. James is
If you like James DM him instead.
If you like
please
James,
don't put it in the comments.
hit him up. He's single. No, please, all I ask is that you hit the subscribe button, and we promise that we will do everything to make this show a valuable resource for you that speaks in a language that resonates with you. But the subscription, it's free, of course. Just hit the subscribe button. It just enables us to get better guests, and more talent onto the show that we can interview and unpack, and you're going to see some of the interviews coming up. But the more subscribers we have, the better we're going to be able to do for you. So that's our commitment to you. So thank you for watching. Please share the content. Please tell your friends. And until next time, boys, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Adam.
All right.
Pleasure.
See you guys.